So we're ready to begin. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Davis,
Present.
Alderman Vaccaro, Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Murphy,
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Present.
and Chairman Vollmer. You have 4 present.
Thank you. Okay, first I'd like to give some information on the flow of the meeting. This is a public meeting for information only, so we will not be voting on anything, nor will we be debating anyone or answering any questions. The role is to hear the public, and we want to make sure that the time is made available to the public. So we're going to shut our mouths and listen. We are going to try to give each individual who has signed up to speak, and honestly, we don't have that many, but I'm going to give 3 minutes to each person as for them to speak. We will be polite to those as they are speaking. We will be polite in our language. We will not be too personal with how we would like to address someone. We all have surnames and/or Mr., Mrs., Ms. So we will be polite to each other. We also have the first part of this meeting, just in case there are some things that you have not had an opportunity to discover. We will have our budget director make a presentation to us, so hopefully that will help you with clarity when you're before us. This is considered to be Board Bill Number 1. It is sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Vollmer. It is our 2020 annual city budget. I'd like to excuse Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Vollmer, and Alderman, what's 23rd Ward? Vaccaro. Okay. Before our budget director moves up, we're going to look at our minutes from the last meeting, committee persons. Which I don't see. Okay. We'll have those at our next committee meeting, so we'll move on to the next item, which is our budget director is going to make a presentation to us. Before he makes it, I'd like to recognize some people in the audience. So former Alderwoman Melinda Long, former Alderperson of the 21st Ward, current school board member Dr. Joyce Roberts, committee woman of the 27th Ward, Keena Carter, and committee man of the 7th Ward. And you know, baby doll, I just call you Murray. So, who's there? Fourth, oh, I did see her come in. Our committee woman from the 4th Ward. Oh, there you are. Okay, I know I saw you come in. What's her name? Okay. And so we also have please stand if you choose to be recognized. I have no issues with that. And do we have a committee person from the 22nd Ward? Oh, there, okay. Anybody else that I did not recognize that should be? Elected officials?
Alderman Todd is, Jesse Todd is there.
There you are over there. Our alderman from the 18th Ward, Jesse Todd. Okay. I don't see anybody else. So, Mr. Budget Director, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, and Chairwoman and members of the committee. This is a presentation that I've made to this committee
We're fine, we're fine.
We have a copy.
It'll pick up.
The biggest fund in which we use for funding specific city services like parks and streets and police and fire, that's where they get most of their funding.
That should be better, thank you.
You're not going to see much of an increase in the general fund next year, just 0.3%. That's quite flat. Where you're going to see a greater increase in funds is in the special revenue fund category, which is at $184.1 million, or 4.4%. What's in the special fund category? That includes special funds such as the use tax, the public safety sales tax, actually 2 public safety sales taxes, the economic development sales tax, some other special funds related to building demolition. The City Justice Center also has a fund this year, and that's adding to that increase of 4.4%. The grant fund category is $69.9 million. That's a 13.7% increase. We did see some additional grant funds for both which are primarily funding health and social services, which is the primary funding that those 2 departments receive. In the debt service fund, mostly flat, $5.8 million. What that is that's the debt service on our general obligation bond debt. So when there's a small amount of the property tax which goes towards that fund. If you recall, we did have a bond issue last year that was approved, but that was to take advantage of other bond debt that was rolling off, so there was no increase. So pretty much it's flat for the next fiscal year. Our capital improvement fund category is $36.4 million. That's down 2.9%, slightly down. Most of that's related to some expiring debt that we had in the current fiscal year. The largest source of funds for the capital fund is the half-cent sales tax. Enterprise funds at $246.0 million. That's 5.8% increase. Enterprise funds is a category that basically encompasses 2 primary funds. It's the airport and the water divisions. And then the biggest increase on that, it's up $14 million. The biggest increase being the water division. They're appropriating over $10 million, mostly for some capital improvements. So they've got a little bit of a capital reserve draw in their operating budget next year. And then the airport is up about $4 million. The internal service fund category of $87.7 million is up 3.5%. Internal services are basically a catch-all category for where departments charge each other. For instance, our health insurance, which is budgeted throughout the departments, that's charged to a common fund, which then pays the premium. So it's not a discretionary fund per se. It's a Okay. So as I mentioned, the internal service funds so they're not discretionary funds. And then the pie chart below, where you're going to see is the general fund, as you can see, represents just under half of the overall budget, 45%. So how are we doing this current fiscal year? This chart here, several charts on this page, indicate what the trends have been through the 3rd quarter of the current fiscal year. Earnings tax, which is our largest source of revenue to the general fund, was up 1.5% year to date. Not strong, but it was a little bit, but it was up, and it was trailing estimates a bit. It's got two components. The individual earnings tax, which is the 1% that comes out of everyone's salaries, that was actually up 4.1% in the third quarter. What was down was the corporate receipts. Now, corporate receipts, you see a little noise in the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year, but the major receipts are received in April, which is our 4th quarter. So I'm not as concerned about the corporate as I am on following the withholdings of individuals through the first part of the year. And matching the earnings tax increase in individuals, you see the payroll tax. That was up 4.3% through the third quarter of this fiscal year. The payroll tax is unlike the earnings tax is 1% on pay, the payroll tax is 0.5%. But it does have some exceptions. Nonprofits and government agencies do not pay that. But indicating that the 4.3% increase in the payroll tax and the withholding piece of the earnings tax shows that the economy is somewhat doing well, because you see a growth in payroll in those quarters. Now, unlike those two, we do have the sales tax. Now, the sales tax was up 0.5%, but the sales tax has not been a significant growth revenue for the city. We don't have much on the retail side. If you look at our long-term growth rate on the sales tax, it's been at 1% or less. So that's right now, and that was pretty much in line with budget, but it's not a significant growth source of revenue for us. Now, on slide 4, what I've got here is an exercise I go through every year to say, hey, what's our gap this year? And I've been doing this a long time, and you always see a gap. But indicating this year, this was somewhat of a benign year, in that I've seen years where we've had gaps in the multi-millions of dollars. This was just a small gap, 2.5 million. So how do you work through that? Our beginning budget, this current fiscal year is $517.5 million. We're tracking close to estimates, so no adjustments there. We've got some one-time sources of about $4.3 million that may not repeat in the current fiscal year, so I pull those out of the revenue. But then we have growth, about 1.6% on some of the taxes, although some of our license and fixed fees don't grow. So we have a $6.1 million in growth there. That leaves us $519.3 million. Well, if our general fund budget base starting this year with 517.5, we know some increases and decreases are there. So, for instance, we got the police, we got $2.5 million for the pay increases and some pension adjustments, or overtime increase in health insurance. Pension actually was down this year. With the market being a little better, we saw our pension costs go down. Fire was the same. The fire department was the same thing. They had some matrix step increases as well as health increases in health insurance. Fire pension also was down. There was also a debt service amount that went down that was expired this current fiscal year. Non-uniform pay increases, that's everybody else, right? So we get a merit increase based on anniversary date of hire of about 1.5%, which we have to budget for in the following year. So you see that increase there of about $2.8 million. Some various other increases, miscellaneous personnel department student salary survey next year, the city council increase in judgment costs of about $1 million. ITSA, which is our information services agency, needs to replace computers. I don't know if you know, Windows is no longer supporting the older equipment, so we have to get new equipment. So that would be about $700,000. On the positive side, on Board of Elections, we had 4 elections this current fiscal year. Well, next year we only have 1, so that would be a declining cost. And then we got increases in utilities, and it was an active year for snow, so we had to buy some more salt for the street department, and that's a $600,000 increase there. And then equipment services has an increase for maintaining the vehicles. So you see how we go through the year. So we're basically trying to identify all the increases that we can identify and place that against whatever the available revenues, and then we have a gap. Well, in this case, the gap is only $2.5 million, which is sort of a benign year, as I've been saying. But still a gap, and we need to bridge it. And so what we do is go through this. We've gone through the budget, and we've identified some minor reductions, about $1 million. And then we had some additional, because some of the special fund revenue categories growing more than budget, we were able to allocate some of those funds as well to offset that. Some of the changes within the government categories, general government and finance up about $300,000. The mayor's office was down in position. Their salaries were up about $100,000. Personnel has an insurance consultant contract, which went down last year. City council staffing was up, and then there were miscellaneous increases in the contract costs. In the non-departmental accounts, what non-departmental is, meaning it's not specific to any one department. So it would be some of our debt service costs are there, our workers' comp costs are there, unemployment costs, things like that aren't specific. So we've got a number of things there. Also, the second year of the state audit, we're undergoing a state audit. Well, there's a cost associated with that. And we have $600,000 budgeted next year for our second year of the cost. We believe it should be completed by 2020. NGA pays citywide capital because some of our debt service is expiring on the capital side. The general fund's contribution was alleviated there, and the capital fund is paying for that. And the reduction in parks, recreation, and forestry, that's $1.1 million. That's actually not a reduction of service. In the current fiscal year, what was done was that the shift of the debris program was moved to streets. And with the thinking being that they had more suitable equipment for some of the heavy debris pickup that they've been encountering in the most recent years. And so that was a move of 20 positions to the street department. Judicial offices, you'll see the sheriff has got an addition of 5 deputy positions. And the other courts and circuit attorney offices primarily flat. County offices, other than that, the reduction in the Board of Elections, also not much of an increase there. Street department, as I mentioned, aside from the debris program moving over, we did add funds for the salt purchases and other supplies. So, public safety, fire department had some supply increases and contractual increases. Corrections was up slightly. And then other than those increases in utilities and equipment repair costs I mentioned earlier, not much else in the Board of Public Services. Overall, you see a net reduction of $1 million. In terms of the general fund revenue outlook, I itemized here by, again, category, the largest one being earnings tax, as I mentioned, estimated $180 million next year. That represents a 2% increase, which is sort of in the middle where long-term growth rate is. It's usually 2.5 or so. But it continues to be about 35% of our general fund revenue. Property tax at $62.4 million is a 1.5% increase, which is pretty much along long-term trends. The sales tax at $54.8 million, that's a 1% increase. The payroll tax at $40.2 million is 1.5%. You'll notice that the 1.5% is slightly less than the earnings tax estimate, simply because historically the payroll tax does track a little bit slower than the earnings tax, because it's a different base. Franchise utility taxes, that's $53.2 million, also 1.5%. Those are taxes for instance, natural gas, electric, telecom, et cetera. And that's another large source of revenue to the general fund. Intergovernmental receipts, that declined 9.9%, mostly related to, I can think of a large item. We did receive some payments from the state this year on prisoner reimbursements. We're catching up. We received about $8 million this year. They were behind on some of that. Typically, our receipts would be in the $5 to $6 million category, so you can't rely on that recurring. That's a one-time. So we pulled that out as estimate for next year. Licenses, $32.8 million. It's pretty flat. Departmental fees and fines. That's pretty much the gamut of everything else the department would charge. For instance, like building permits, being the largest one of those. Park, if you rent something out in parks or something, that would also be included in that category. And then the other category is $31.2 million. That's down $3.4 million, 3.4%. Those are transfers into the general fund from other funds. So, for instance, last year, and I remember at the end of the we had an additional $1 million in parking meter. Well, that's not necessarily a recurring source of revenue, so that would not be budgeted forward. So you can see the chart below, on a percentage basis, as I mentioned, the largest source, the earnings tax, is 35%. Special fund categories. Well, I mentioned that earlier, the local use tax. Now, if you're familiar, the local use tax is a tax on out-of-state sales. So it supplements our sales. If you recall, our sales tax doesn't grow that much. It's because we're not strong in retail. But what we have been seeing is a certain amount of an increase in the use tax, simply because we're now beginning to see payments for online sales. So for instance, Amazon and all, which has been good for the city, simply because, again, as I mentioned, we're not strong on the retail sales. So local use tax is up 13% year to date. So revised estimate of $35.8 million, with FY20 not expecting much growth at 35.8. Now, for those who are familiar, the use tax has an allocation based on from ordinance. The Affordable Housing Commission, which by formula would get $5 million. This budget allocates that full $5 million plus an additional $1 million. So the base of new revenue would be $6 million. Plus, we're also reappropriating the $600 million in the unspent monies they had from prior appropriations. So their total budget is $6.6 million. Healthcare Trust Fund is allocated, its full allocation at $5 million. Building demolition also gets, by formula, $3 million per year. It's allocated an additional $825 over and above the formula for next year, which is a $900,000 increase. And then beyond those three items, everything else is used for supplementing other services. And you can see that list there. Forestry has got an additional $350,000 for addressing some of its weed and debris needs. Refuse at $700,000, housing conservation. Police get a portion of that, which is a $1 million increase, helping with the general fund portion of the budget. Health Division, it gets most of its local funds from the use tax, $7.4 million. And Human Services also gets $400,000. So that's $22.2 million, bringing the total budget for the local use tax $37.6 million. The Economic Development Sales Tax Fund, that $21.1 million, plus about $500,000 in unspent funds from this current fiscal year. It also has a formula of allocation based on ordinance. Transit purposes is 60%. That's at $12.6 million. That was for identifying options for expanding our transit system in the city. And those funds have been going into the fund and currently accumulating. Neighborhood stabilization at 10% plus an additional $500,000 in unspent funds goes to our planning and development and community development agencies at $2.5 million. Workforce development, another $2.1 million for Slight and Human Services for adding jobs and job programs. Public safety infrastructure, another 10%, $2.1 million. Those will be supplementing our 911 systems as well as our SEMA emergency management system. And financing a new public safety answering point, that's PSAP, which is a consolidated facility for bringing in all our dispatches from the fire, police, and EMS under one roof. So there was a plan for trying to develop a new PSAP facility to do that. And then city infrastructure needs, 10% is allocated to the capital fund, which you'll see on a subsequent slide. One other important special fund we have that was implemented last fiscal year is the half-cent sales tax for public safety, known as Prop P. Prop P includes actually two pieces. There's a half-cent sales tax, which was allocated to police, fire, and the circuit attorney. And then there's a local use tax portion, because when we raise the sales tax, the use tax also rises. And in both of those instances, there was an allocation by ordinance which allocated percentages to each of those amounts. So if you look at the sources of revenue, you see the sales tax revenue at $21.1 million, the use tax revenue related to the sales tax 4.1, for total revenue $25.2 million. Now, how is that allocated? The sales tax portion by ordinance, 66% goes to the police department. And so that pays for the $6,000 pay increase they had this year, plus all the fringes and fringe benefits and pension costs related to that. And then there's additional funds available, $1.2 million for equipment, and which will be doing fleet replacements this fiscal year. In the fire department, similarly, they got a 28% allocation, Again, that's $5.9 million for the $6,000 pay increase they got this year, plus fringes, benefits, pensions, and then another $1.2 million for equipment replacement, 6.37 total. Circuit attorney is allocated 6% of those funds as well for staffing and other items within their department. So that's $22.36 million, and then of the use tax portion, which is just over $4.4 million, there's 25% allocated to after-school programs and jobs, most of which are for youth jobs, and the Department of Public Safety has $325,000 allocation, and then youth cadets in the police department for those who would be interested in pursuing careers in law enforcement. So those have been implemented this current fiscal year and will continue next year. The circuit attorney's office receives 7.7% of those funds, the use tax funds as well. That's about another $300,000. Recreation programs, 25% allocation. That funded 11 recreation positions and some contractual programs within that department. Building demolition received 17.3% of another $700,000. So that combined with the allocation from the use tax that we talked about earlier, that gives you about $4.5 million for building demolition. And then there's the social works and mental health piece allocated 25%, and that's all allocated to the human services department for those social work programs, and it's just over $1 million. I mentioned the capital fund budget at $36.4 million, a slight decrease from the previous fiscal year. Again, most of that decrease is related to the fact that we have a smaller debt service. You can see from the pie how it's allocated. Again, there are formula allocations based on the half-cent sales tax, 20% of which goes to citywide accounts. The largest piece of this goes to the ward groups, $9.2 million next year. That is the aldermen basically work with the Board of Public Service and the Street Department coming up with projects for those boards. Existing citywide debt, most of that is for building repairs and things that we've already financed. There is a proposal to provide about another $8 million in purchases for city rolling stock. So that's one of our service vehicles, that's dump trucks and things that are falling behind our replacement cycle. We're trying to catch up. Total personnel changes by department. You can see the general fund being the largest source of 5,000 positions. That's actually up 17, including some of those positions that I mentioned earlier, such as the sheriff's office. Special funds are up by 4, that's 488. Grant funds 258, and enterprise funds 899. So we're actually up 45% this year, which is a bit of a change from prior years. But if you look back 10 years, we're still down. We're in all those fund categories by over 400 positions. The general fund's down by 240. It's warm in here. Pension costs, as I mentioned earlier, are down a little bit this year, simply because of the performance of the markets, and as well as some debt service being paid off this current fiscal year. But I should mention that they remain elevated, $81.3 million, all systems combined. I'm going to jump to the next slide, which gets you whole sorts of details, and you can look through that. But the key takeaways from this slide, however, are that one, you've got 4 plans: the employee retirement system and 2 fires, and 1 police retirement system. They're funded close to about 80%, which isn't bad. You can see the employee retirement system is at 83.4. The frozen fire retirement system, which was frozen when we did a pension reform back in 2013, is actually fully funded. The new fire retirement plan is 61.8% funded, but it's only 5 years old. So basically, when you have a plan that's not that old, it sort of it takes a while to get back up to full funding. The police department, police retirement system is down, is a little down, it's 78.4%. 80% is considered a minimum where you'd like to be. Now, the only concern here is that while those are not poorly funded, we are getting long in the economic cycle. So these kind of costs are sort of subject to the next recession. So you can imagine the next time the revenues start declining, the market doesn't perform well. That's they're both going in the opposite direction. So while revenues would start going down, the increase in costs of pensions would go up. So it's something we always try to keep an eye on. While you hear the need for pension reform, that's one of the driving reasons. Now, there is some good news in this past fiscal year in terms of fund balances. One of the things that we've tried to do, and we get knocked for from the rating agencies, is you don't have enough reserves. In case something goes wrong, what have you got? And if you ever ask why do we need something as important as a fund reserve, I can point to FY9 and FY10. Well, actually, FY10 and FY11. You can see we started on a cash basis in those years prior to the recession at $25 million, and then we spent down $18 million simply because revenues fell, and we had deficits in those years. And so that was a pretty dramatic decrease in those two fiscal years. Since then, we've been slowly increasing, but in this past year, we did two things. One, we did receive a $10 million one-time payment from the Parker Fund, which obviously helps and that increases our balance. But two, we also did a specific effort to budget for allocating to the fund balance. So we've got an amount of about 1.5% of pay, which is about $3.4 million to say this is allocated towards our fund balance. And so you can see at the start of fiscal 20, there's been a jump of $31.2 million. Our goal has always been a minimum of 5% of the budget. Most rating agencies would suggest that should be only a minimum because they cite as much as 2 months of operating costs, which I think is a bit high, but our target should be more along the lines of at least 10%. And so in the next fiscal year, we're continuing to budget that 1.5% and hopefully move closer to that number. So finally, a recap, total budget of $1,149.2 million, 3% increase. We have the second year of budget for the Economic Development Sales Tax Fund, Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. We got multiple use tax funds allocated for affordable housing at a $1 million increase, building demolition at $825,000 increase, and then all capital funds for awards are fully allocated. The general fund at $519.3 million is a 0.3% increase, and bridges a modest gap that we've improved on since the last few years. And importantly, it maintains an annual mechanism for funding to strengthening our fund reserve. Having said all that, we do have the continuing longer-term challenges. Again, as I mentioned, we're entering our 11th year of economic expansion, so eventually we have to prepare for the next recession. We are continuing to strengthen our reserve base, continuing to look for pension reforms. As I mentioned, that's always a risk to us. And then financing of our capital infrastructure needs, which is always a challenge. And that is the recap of our budget presentation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to do a couple of things very quickly before we get into public testimony. The first would be, I'd like to recognize Alderperson from the 3rd Ward, Alderman Bosley, came in the room. There you are, okay. And I saw somebody else come in.
The Board of Education.
I recognized her. Somebody else came in. There he is. Okay. So I wanted our bishop for the St. Louis Clergy Coalition to please stand. Most people have not had an opportunity to really know who you are. And I thank you very much for all that you do and how you have coalesced us in the city so that we can have a more harmonious way to do the work that needs to be done. Thank you. The next thing is I'm required to read the Rule 27 for public hearings. So let me find that. Okay, I got it. Okay. So there are 5 items here. After the presentation of a bill at any public hearing, the proponents and the opponents shall be heard alternately. All persons who wish to testify at a public hearing shall sign a list which shall be made available by the chairman of the committee at least 1/2 hour before the announced time of the hearing. The initial presentation of any witness shall be no longer than 5 minutes. I have indicated at the beginning of the meeting that we will do 3 minutes. The list has gotten longer, except with the permission of the committee chairperson, and I've already taken care of that. But any witness may respond to questions by members of the committee for an additional period of time to be determined by the committee chairperson. And as I shared with you at the beginning of the meeting, we are here to listen to you, the public. You don't need to hear us. We don't need to try to debate anybody. We need to get information in order to make our decisions later on. The above 2 paragraphs shall be included in any announcement of a public hearing required by law to be published or posted. Further, the above 2 paragraphs shall be read by the committee chairman at the beginning of any public hearing. It is not necessary that the above 2 paragraphs be printed in the notice to the members of the committee. A committee may hear testimony on more than one bill at any particular hearing. A list of names and addresses of all persons who testify at a public hearing in support of or in opposition to any bill and a copy of each written testimony submission shall be kept by the clerk as a public record and shall be available to the members of the committee and the members of the Board of Aldermen when they consider said bill. So basically it says that we shall recognize, assign a time that is not more than 5 minutes for the speaking. We shall keep records. We shall identify who is pro and con, and those records shall be available at the time of decision-making for that bill. Now, what we didn't do when we signed in was we didn't put addresses, and we didn't identify pros and cons, because if I go by the 2 lists that I have here, everybody is supporting Bill 1. I know that's not true, but that's what appears on these sheets. Everybody signed under pro, and no one signed under con. So what I'm going to do after this is over with, I will have sheets out here so that you can sign in the appropriate place after you speak, and make sure that you include an address, because we have to have public records for that. So, Madam Clerk, can you please put 2 sheets up there? No. Put 2 sheets up there. Indicate the purpose of the sheets at the top as it should be with the date. Circle the pro and the con so that people don't miss it. And after you speak, make sure that you move to the side, you fill in the document appropriately so that we'll have accurate records, okay? And so the first person is John Chasnoff.
Hello, everyone. I appreciate you being available in the evening to speak or to listen to us speak, and appreciate the chance to address you. I signed up for the pro column because I am generally in favor of the budget, though I would like to see some amendments to the budget. And specifically, I came to talk about including in the budget a line item to support and finance a program called Cure Violence. So I'm with an organization called the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression. We've worked the last 3 or 4 years on presentations around the city and the county, and we've called those presentations Reimagining or Re-envisioning Public Safety. The idea behind that is that we have had a certain model for public safety for a long time, at least since Reagan and possibly farther back than that, where we thought we could essentially arrest and incarcerate our way to public safety. I've worked now on issues of criminal justice, advocating for social justice in the city under probably 6 different police chiefs, and every one of them has said we are not going to be able to arrest our way out of our current problems, and I agree with them on that. what we've seen is that the arrest and incarcerate model has resulted in a huge expansion in our jails and in our prisons. They're overflowing. We can no longer finance them. Plus, they have not solved the problem. So we still have an issue of violent crime in the city that has not been solved by trying to arrest and incarcerate our way out of the problem. So in our presentations, we've asked the question, what is it that really makes people safe? You know, what is it people need to feel safe? You can't feel safe if you don't have adequate housing. You can't feel safe without health care. You can't feel safe without jobs and the education required to get that good job and be able to support your family. And lo and behold, when you look at those things that people need to feel safe, those are the things that get at the root causes of crime. So crime goes down in communities that are healthy, that have adequate housing, that have adequate health care, that have adequate jobs and education. So we've been advocating for a switch in our priorities. This year we renamed our presentation. We started calling it Reinvesting in Public Safety because we think the budget reflects our priorities and we think we need to invest in those things that build communities up instead of break down individuals and break down communities, which mass incarceration has done. So specifically, we've been advocating for a program called Cure Violence, which looks at gun violence as a public health issue and tries to intervene in the epidemic of gun violence in the same way that you would intervene in the epidemic of measles that we're having around the country right now. There are going to be some other folks tonight who are going to speak specifically to that, so I don't want to go too deeply into it, but I hope that you all will consider Cure Violence as a effective means of approaching our issues of gun violence. And I think, too, that I just want to point out that I think there is room in the budget for a program like this. We tend to think that we need to give the police all the money that they need, and that usually translates into all the money they ask for, but we haven't taken the deep look into the police budget to see if some programs are effective. So just for example, we spend a lot of money on shot spotters. Around the country, shot spotters are notorious for resulting in very few additional arrests. ShotSpotter as a company is notorious for asking cities not to be transparent about the data around their program. And so I think we need to dig into the budget and see, is ShotSpotter being effective? Another example is the Real-Time Crime Center, which has been given millions of dollars in the last few years. We, as citizens doing sunshine requests for information, we've had very little success at getting information around the Real-Time Crime Center. How many arrests has it resulted in? How effective is it? What I hear from the police department is that it's pretty good at catching stolen cars and dealing with the carjacking issue, but not so good on some of the other questions that are big problems for us in St. Louis. One more example, I did a sunshine request on SWAT. There were, between 2012 and 2017, there were over 1,600 times when SWAT was deployed. Out of those 1,600 times, there were 8 where they were used in an active shooter or a hostage situation. That's what you always hear SWAT is for, those active shooter and hostage situations. Only 8 out of more than 1,600. That's less than half of 1%. The vast majority of SWAT deployments, and I'll finish up, the vast majority of SWAT deployments are for high-risk search warrants. So I asked the question, well, if they're so high risk, how many times were the police shot at during those execution of those warrants? Out of 619 high-risk warrants, there were only 3 times when police were shot at. So I know we just put a bunch of money into a new SWAT headquarters. I saw that there's a 13% increase in the local use tax. The police part of that budget went up $1 million, up to $11 million. So I think that there's room in the budget to find money for Cure Violence, and I hope you'll push for that program. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So remember, you need to clarify on this sheet for me so I have accurate information that also includes your address. Next I have on the list is Susie Chasnoff.
Hi, Hi, thank you very much for allowing us to speak today on the budget. I also would like to push for cure violence to be part of the budget. I think it's really important that we start doing some common sense approaches to dealing with the violence in our community. I'm talking about police violence, I'm talking about community violence. We need to view it as a health problem that needs to be addressed by providing proactively as opposed to reactively when we're dealing with crime. I wanted to speak specifically about the difference between cure violence and focused deterrence, because those words get bandied about as if they're the same program, and they're not. Both programs have called their on-the-ground operations ceasefire, and that has caused confusion. The difference between cure violence and focused deterrence is cure violence views violence as a health issue and deals with it as such. Whereas focused deterrence still deals with it as a criminal problem, and they use a stick and a carrot. So they'll say, okay, let's get all of you people together that have been having violence in your communities, and those of you causing the violence, well, you can become part of our program, and we'll reward you by providing you services, or if you don't become a part of it, we'll punish you by putting you in jail. So it just adds to the arrest and incarcerate model, which is a failed model of dealing with this problem. So they've also focused deterrence, though they say they're the stick and the carrot, repeatedly as you read how they have evolved in other communities, have fallen short of actually providing the services. So they actually just become another arm of the mass incarceration failed model of arrest and incarcerate. Cure violence does not work with police on the ground. That's very important to gain the community's trust. They don't pass intel on to the police, whereas focused deterrence has police on the ground. You can't gain the community's trust that way. Now, if you go to Cure Violence's website, they do involve the police in more of a hierarchical manner in terms of they inform the police, these are the programs we're working on, these are the results we're having. And the police, there's testimony on their website about how happy the police have been with this, and that they feel like they've developed a good partnership with Cure Violence and are working well with them. So it's not that they don't, appreciate that the police are part of the equation. It's just they're not going to have that on the ground level. On the ground level, what they do is they invite what they call violence interrupters who come from the community, who are already involved in the violence and don't like what they're seeing. They involve those people in mediating with other people who are prone to violence, and they've had dramatic success in reducing violence, gun violence, immediately, and then maintaining that decrease over a period of time. They are evidence-based, they are data-driven. Cure Violence proactively addresses the root causes of crime because they do match people up with services. So it's not just the violence interrupters, but people come in and say, look, obviously, your family needs a job, your family needs a good education, your family needs affordable housing. What's available in the community to provide that for you? And then we build those resources. We keep allocating money. We keep divesting money from failed models of public safety and putting it into successful models of real public safety that proactively prevent crime from happening in the first place, not reactively dealing with it after. I just want to see, so actually what Cure Violence does is it de-incentivizes crime. I just want to see if there's any other points. When Jimmy Edwards talks about ceasefire, he is talking about focused deterrence. It's really important to make that distinction. He's not talking about Cure Violence. When Lewis Reed talks about ceasefire, he's talking about Cure Violence. When the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression, of which I'm a member, talks about ceasefire, we're talking about Cure Violence. So it's really important to make those two distinctions. And Jimmy Edwards has also recommended that those two programs run concurrently. That would be a disaster. Their approach is so different that you would have such mixed results that it would not be effective. So I'm here to urge you to allocate the money. I think they're hoping to get $650,000 for the first center. They are going to come in June to give us an assessment and an evaluation to which you're all going to be invited if you haven't been already. And at that time, did I just lose my train of thought? I think I did. What was I saying?
Come view the center, the 650 for the center, and then view.
Yes, thank you so much. I do that a lot. So they're going to probably recommend that there's 3 different areas in St. Louis that could use these centers. And if we could start with one, we need an allocation of $650,000 to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bob Barker. Oh, there you are, Bob. If you decide that you don't want to speak, it's okay to share that with me when I call your name. I did notice that several people came in within the last 10 minutes. If you are interested in speaking, we normally don't do this, but because we want to hear from the public, I will ask that you sign your name on this sheet. And put it down here, please, with a pen.
Alderwoman, you didn't mention that we can leave and not speak, because I was walking up, right?
No, you know I wouldn't do that to you.
We've known each other, I'm not going to say how many years.
Okay, long time.
I see a lot of friends of mine in this room, and some of you know that I was once a teacher in the St. Louis public schools, and there's a few of us around here, I know. Dr. Joyce, their friend. So I'm going to start with a teaching moment. Over here, you guys should know this. I looked up in the dictionary yesterday, ways and means. Do you know what this committee does? I'm just paraphrasing this. Ways and Means is a committee of people that figure out and put the means together in a way to do something. And we have over $1 billion, which I think is some pretty good means, and I think maybe we can all work together as a community to figure out the way to do a few very good things. Well, I've been traveling around the country in the last few weeks, and I just returned, but I told some people that I was going into a downtown area. They said, "Oh, no, don't go down there." I said, "I'm from St. Louis. I got this." Now, the one thing that we have that's important, and very important, and I've heard, is we have, by the way, I'm pro the budget. We need money. So who doesn't like money? But we need to do something in this town. And I've heard this word cure. But first, Paul, I want to thank you. I love numbers. And I heard Paul say a couple things. One word that he used was allocation. And so allocation of money can give us the means and the way to do something. The other thing, Paul, that you said there's some good news, that there's some reserves. I like that, because that means maybe there's something that we can do something with. Now, there's some aldermen here who have some wards that have so much potential. There's people who live here, George and DeVille, and Third Ward. John, there is so much great potential in this city. And there's so many great neighborhoods that we can draw up and turn this into a community. And the thing that we need to do is do this from the people up. These communities are built from us, from we the people, not from up high, that you're going to do this and this up here, and we're going to merge all of you, and you're all going to be happy ever after. That's not going to work. I didn't mean to do a con, but I couldn't help myself. So one thing that we need, and I've heard above and beyond, we need to do something about the terrible things that have been going on, people losing their lives needlessly. I have a friend who came into town this week because 6 of her friends were murdered in one night. And I love her. With one of my best friends for 30 years. And I'm so sad that she had to come into town and actually meet me for the first time under these circumstances. But there is a way, and I've heard this word cure. Here's the teacher again. This program, Cure Violence, it is a true and tested program out of Chicago. They're all over the world. They come into a community and they talk to the people who are in the game. And people see the writing on the wall and they want to get out of the game. They see their friends dying and they say, what did I get into this? And some of these people are children. Some of them are very young. And right now we have a lot of opportunity in this country. I heard a thing on the radio just driving here that the people who are leaving prisons and getting jobs, and there's lots of jobs right now. So we can see the communities growing and people getting a chance. But this program, Cure Violence, I've heard a lot of good things. I've been researching it, and those of you who know me from the board, what do I do upstairs? I look for people who are new up there and I teach them how the board works. That's what I'm doing up around there every Friday. And I'll be here this Friday and I'm going to talk to you and invite you, all of you, to the first Cure Violence meeting. We'd like to see all the aldermen there. So you can, I don't want to tell you, 5 minutes. I don't want to tell you what to do. I want you to see what's going on and make your own decision. But I have been reading this, and this is a program that works. It's a program we need, and you can. You have the means to the way that we can get this program going and started, and let's get this town going, man! I'm pro. Come see me at the Board of Aldermen on Fridays. I'm usually around.
Now, you talking about tomorrow?
So I'll be here tomorrow.
Oh, we're not in.
No, we're not. We're not in
next
session
Friday.
tomorrow. And then Monday's a holiday.
So,
Madam Chairwoman, I just want you to notice he said we. He
I
included
love we.
himself in it. I love it too.
I love we. It's all about we.
I'll never be elected. But I'll be around.
All right.
Good enough.
Our next person on the list is, I was supposed to recognize somebody that came in.
Alderman Boyd, Alderwoman Boyd.
Oh, our committee. Okay, there you are. So Alderwoman Pamela Boyd, 27th Ward, has joined the committee. Our next person is Mitch Eagles.
Hello, everyone. Members of this committee, thank you so much for having us here tonight. I'm also speaking in favor of amending the budget for money for the Cure Violence program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how this program works, the one that John was talking about earlier. But I want to first reemphasize his point that the last, I think, 7 police chiefs have said we can't arrest our way out of this crime problem. We know that. I studied physics in school, so I look at data, right? I look, and if something's working, it'll say in the numbers, right? And we know that what we have right now is not working. So I'm really excited about this program. I've done a bunch of reading. We have some stats from other cities that we'll be showing tonight about how it has worked, how it immediately reduces crime, and how it maintains that reduction in crime, especially violent crime. So there are 3 pillars to how this program works. The first is you interrupt transmission, right? When violence happens, people are raring. They maybe want to make a decision that in the heat of the moment feels right, but doesn't. So that's the interrupters of the Cure Violence program are on the ground. They're members of communities where violence is occurring, who know people in that community, who may know people directly involved in what's happening. These folks are trained to mediate conflicts, to work to interrupt violence propagating from one person to another. Just like public health, right? Just like if there's a flu outbreak, we have to prevent the flu from going from one person to another. The second pillar is identify and change the thinking of a highest potential transmitters. So this is somebody's, maybe in the mood to do something that they might regret. These interrupters connect them with resources, job training, counseling, build a safe situation so that these people, might see a larger picture that they don't in that moment, right? It's somebody to talk to, are these interrupters. I encourage you, on June 18th, we will be having a screening, and there's a film called The Interrupters, which talks about these people on the ground in Chicago doing this work. And they connect with people, and they connect them with resources. The third aspect is changing group norms. So working within the networks that they have from working on the ground with people, doing public education, doing community events, mobilizing communities so that we change, so that violence might not be the first thing that people go to when they're, reacting to a situation, right? They have a proven model. They have a number of cities across the United States where this has worked. And the cost on return, if that's what you're really looking at, it clearly pans out as well. So I just really hope that you all will consider this. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know you said that you're not looking to, but I think it's important that you guys understand this as well because it's a very important program. So
I want to give you some assurance that we are very much in tune.
Great.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. Oh, they've sent it to us already.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. The next person is Reverend Darrell Gray.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Reverend Darrell Gray. I live at 4358 Enright Avenue. I am a resident of St. Louis.
Good.
I'm also a pastor. And I wanted to start off very quickly with, there's a passage of scripture, it's Matthew 6:21. It says, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Where you spend your money determines your priorities. That's what we believe as Christian folk. The budget that we have looked at doesn't seem to reflect that we're putting our money where the people's heart is. It doesn't reflect that we're looking at the critical needs of our community. And I submit to this committee and your honorable members that this budget, in my estimation, I just think is not valid at this point. According to what you have given us through the budget process, the Board of E&A should have held a public hearing. I don't recall any public hearings by the Board of E&A, and that should have been done back in April. If the Board of E&A is basically responsible for this budget before it comes to you, why wasn't there an opportunity to have a public hearing so that we would have an opportunity to influence really the 3 people outside of your bureaucrats who make this budget? You have an awesome task as a committee, but you can only complete your task if the process is followed adequately and appropriately. It hasn't. And so now we come here and we're hollering and screaming and crying and begging and pleading to you when in fact 3 people have not done their job. The mayor, the president of the Board of Aldermen, and the comptroller. And so I submit to you that if you're going to validate this, then one of the things that you might consider is going back to the Board of E&A and saying, listen, we can't do our job until you do yours. I'm following what you've handed out, and I'm looking at the review of the city budget and the process. And what I guess strikes me more than anything else is that it seems as that it's department heads that do a review, and based upon their review internally, they determine what their budget needs are. Department heads, not all the people. That this process begins with department heads, many whose salaries are way too high anyway. Many who supervise over paid city employees who are living paycheck to paycheck. And so this budget begins with your department heads, and it's an internal review that doesn't reflect what is happening in the city. It doesn't reflect the number of murders that have occurred. It doesn't reflect the number of crime that has occurred. It doesn't reflect poverty. It doesn't reflect lack of resources for education. It doesn't reflect that. It's basically the same old, but we're going to add about 3 or 4% for cost of living increase. That's what it reflects. It does not reflect the human need. It doesn't reflect our human needs. And so that's why you continue to have 57, 58, 60% going to public safety and less than 2% going to human services. It makes no sense. It has become the normal. That's why we're sitting here, because we're really tired of the normal. That's what this budget reflects. As I said, I'm looking at what you've given me. If I look at what it says under descriptions and definitions of what the Board of E&A is supposed to do, they can make periodic changes without coming back to the Board of Aldermen. I submit to you that once this budget is approved, no changes will be made. How do I know that? Because it very seldom happens. Because that's the normal. We're asking you to change the normal so that we can change this city. And so I'm pro-budget. I believe that we need a budget, but we need a budget that reflects what we really need in making this city safer and more healthier, to provide accessibility to resources and wealth. So now it's on you. I support cure violence. I know that somebody said, well, it's going to take about $500,000, $600,000 per neighborhood. But we're spending $500 million on public safety already. And if we can find a model, and Judge Edwards, maybe he's saying, well, I don't agree with all of it, then take out the best. Then give us the best, put it in the 21st Ward or the 3rd Ward or whatever ward where all this high crime is happening, and see if it works, because you're giving money to programs now, and we don't even know if those programs work. There's no evidence that they work. $1 million youth crime prevention initiatives, you're giving money to the same people over and over, but there's no, how do you measure that? And so people are coming now and they're saying that no more normal. No more normal. But I submit, as I said in the beginning, I'm not even sure that the process is valid because of that public hearing that didn't happen. Okay, and so I'm wrapping up. We're asking y'all, because you represent us. I believe that you represent the best of us, not the worst of us. And we're saying that we need you to be your better self. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. I'm answering all easy questions. My wife will answer all the hard ones. I'm just thought I'd share that with you.
So, just for clarification, this did have a public hearing on April 18th with E&A. And also to further clarify, all E&A meetings are posted publicly. And many of you all, I've seen you at the E&A meetings, so.
April 18th, I'm writing that down. And there was a public notice that went out and
Absolutely.
all that good stuff. Then
Absolutely.
I stand corrected.
Absolutely. I don't go to all of them, but I know a lot of you all do. So I appreciate that too, that you are present. I love that. So our next person on the list, Melinda Long. Do you choose to still speak? Okay, it doesn't matter.
Melinda Long, there's my wonderful alderman there, John Muhammad. How are you? 21st Ward. I just wanted to, when the initial gentleman was up speaking about the budget, I personally look at things just like I look at my bank statement. Hey, I have these expenses. I've got this X amount of dollars coming in. How can I navigate the expenses? The other individuals who were up here before me spoke about individual programs. And I don't know if the E&O, if your committee has the ability to really monitor those programs to see if they're really working effectively. I don't know if you guys have the ability to do that. But my concern is, how can we get more money into the city? That's what I'm thinking about. And why do we have to spend so much money on certain things? And in particular, when the gentleman, I want to ask you, would the board ever consider just ruling out for a short period of time, no more tax abatements for any businesses? No more. Okay, I mean, let me rephrase it, not no more. Maybe at least like a 10-year, 10-year. Yes, no more. Just shut down the tax abatements for a while because we need money. And these businesses, they do have it. They have it. I really do believe they have it. And if you guys would consider that, at the same time, with the building demolitions, now I'm thinking, St. Louis City has a lot of really good brick buildings. And sadly, it's in my community, the 21st Ward, the 3rd Ward, North, where a lot of buildings may have to come down. But now these contractors, they keep the bricks. Is that correct? Do they keep the bricks when they demo these buildings? My understanding is that they do keep the bricks. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It depends, hold it. It depends on the contract and how it was bidded and accepted.
Okay.
Every contract can be different.
Okay. Because I was thinking, why do we have to pay them to tear down our buildings when they're going to keep the bricks, and then they're going to sell the bricks, and those bricks are very valuable. I mean, it's the old school, however they put it together back then. I don't know, maybe, I'm sure you guys can look into a little bit more in greater detail on that, about that. But I think that was real. I'm also thinking about the sales tax, because I'm sure you've probably seen on the news how a lot of vehicles are driving around the city with these temp tags. And I know, I've seen them on my block. I've actually seen my brother, the son of my brother-in-law, whose temp tags have expired months ago, and between you and I literally went up to that tag, and I tugged on it for a minute. I was mad. I was wanting to snatch it off, but then I realized I don't think I'm really supposed to do that. But it just, when I'm stating that, it's because it angered me so much. Because the article in the Post, it actually stated about how the millions of dollars we are losing because these individuals are not paying for their plates. You and I had to pay for our plates and tags. So why not them? They need to do that. So now I understand with our alderman, we're going to have in our district, the 6th district, we're going to have our task force meeting next month, June. And I am going to ask them, hey, listen, it only takes maybe like 4 hours. If you guys could delegate, and that's not you, if they could delegate maybe 4 hours a month, just drive around. And just, when you see those tags, don't even waste your time talking to the driver of the car. Just go up, when you pull them over, because we need to get money. And see, that's what I'm thinking, basically, how we can get more money in. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I can get that next sheet now. Mindy Rolfe. Is Mindy still here? Okay, we'll move on to the next person. Keith Rose.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Keith Rose. I'm here on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild St. Louis chapter, where I am director. The National Lawyers Guild St. Louis chapter has enthusiastically endorsed Cure Violence, and we hope to bring it here to St. Louis. So I myself am actually not an attorney, but I am a researcher. And as a researcher, one of the things that I pride myself on is knowing the statistics and finding out which data signifies, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead, I'm sorry for that.
That's fine. Knowing what the data means and how we can use data to better understand what's going on. So as Reverend Gray mentioned earlier, there's a lot of feel-good programs that are being used in different cities, including St. Louis. And I myself am someone who thinks that we really should have a model that is evidence-based and something that we actually can verify with numbers. And that's why when doing the research, I settled on Cure Violence as something that our organization would endorse. Cure Violence itself has had independent reviews done for it all across the country. So Cure Violence doesn't just exist in a few cities. It actually is currently being operated in 25 cities across the United States. And it's been around for years now. And in those 25 cities, they have seen reductions as high as 73% in shootings and killings. And when we're talking about these numbers, it's important to realize that these are human lives. These are people's community members. These are people's children and parents. And so 73% reduction in deaths is remarkable when you think about the individual lives that's impacted. Some examples of cities that have been implementing Cure Violence include Baltimore, where there's been a 56% reduction in killings. In New York City, there's been a 63% reduction in shootings. In Philadelphia, there's been a 30% reduction in shootings. Cure Violence has been shown to have a 40 to 70% reduction in shootings and killings in every single city it has been implemented and funded in. And that funding part is important. But it's important also to understand that these drops in shootings and killings are not something that just happens, quickly. There's a rapid reduction, but then there's also a sustained reduction. I'm holding in front of me, there's a chart, a timeline, and it's showing Chicago in Logan Square neighborhood. And you can see an immediate drop off in the amount of shootings, but then you also see that over the next 5 years, it's sustained. And that's what we need. We need to reduce the number of shootings in our city now, and we need to reduce them for our children. This is a program that can do both. Now, I also want to turn your attention to a report that's come out just today by the Show Me Institute. I don't know if any of you have seen it. And while that's not an organization I normally cite, I will say that within their report, they point out that the FBI data shows that St. Louis Police Department has more employees per capita than any city departments other than Washington and New York City. Meanwhile, they're asking for more police officers for our department. Now, this report from the Show Me Institute tells us that in 2017, St. Louis City spent $1,207 per resident on its police department, compared to $787 in Kansas City, $580 in Louisville, and $543 in Indianapolis. So when we're talking about where our resources could go and where our resources have been going, we need to understand that the police department is already over capacity, and yet they're underperforming. We need to bring in a new program like Cure Violence that can address the root causes of crime, which is poverty, which is violence, which is lack of jobs, which is lack of hope. And so we at the National Lawyers Guild are encouraging you to amend the budget to fully fund Cure Violence so that our city can begin to see these decreases that we've seen across the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I shall give the last opportunity for anybody who came in. If you would like to speak, there's a sheet here for you to sign on. Also, I shall remind you again, for those who are coming up, to make sure you fill out the sheets. There's one on this side, one on this side. We need accurate information. I prefer you print. We also need an address to have accurate records, because this will become a part of the minutes and the records of the Board of Aldermen. So the next person up to speak is Tony Russell. Hi.
How you doing? You say what?
Do you remember the last time I saw you?
Was it pleasant?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't? Oh, what? That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I just want to say before we start off, if you see me with some temp tags and they old, don't tug at them. I'm just going to work or dropping my kids off at school or something. I'm just trying to make it. Hey, so look, I see the budget. It's kind of sad. So I guess it's kind. I don't agree that we can spend like 60% of the budget on public safety and get the results that we get. There's no way that we, the most dangerous city in the United States of America, and I think we are top 30 in the world, which is kind of odd, that a city barely over 300,000 people have that. So I just want to make some amendments, some recommendations, if you would. I would probably start with giving all St. Louis Public Schools teachers an $8,000 to $10,000 raise. Yeah.
I shall clarify. We can't do that. We have no control over the school budget. It is its own jurisdiction.
So you can't put any money into the budget?
These funds cannot go into the school system. I'm a former school board president.
That's perfect.
If I had my way, it would be an additional $15,000.
Okay, so
Thank you, ma'am.
so we don't control any funding to help the school buildings or nothing, huh?
Sir, we have no control, no say-so.
That's property tax. Okay. So if we losing, I think they said in 2016 we losing around 2017 they had a study saying we're losing $7 million in property tax by having the LRA buildings just sitting there vacant, derelict. And I believe they said 5 of the 7 million north of Delmore is where the 5 million is. I think we should just sell those homes to people, and I think we should fund home improvement loans through the city of St. Louis. I think that would improve property value and most definitely put families, and then we can get some tax revenue, so maybe we can have some, better schools. My next step, I would say, is I know when our city was, our community, I'm going to say that because I live north of Delmore, and so north of Delmore was a lot better when our Parks and Recs was fully funded. When kids, like this summer, for the life of me, I can't understand why the St. Louis Cardinals can't find enough black kids to play baseball for free. I just can't. I can't fathom it. I drive through Baden, O'Fallon Park, Fairground Park, there's baseball fields. If they're done, there's nobody on it. And so I think we should vastly improve funding into Parks and Recs. I saw $700,000, well, around $1 million for youth programs, and $700,000 was youth cadets, like kids playing police. I think they would like to play with a ball or actually, go see a baseball game for free in their lifetime, because a lot of kids haven't. I would say another thing. I think in our budget it says, if you can go to the slide here, it says health and human services 0.3%, not even 1%. It's kind of, I don't even know what that goes into. So I know when I leave here, or if I come back here in about 3 or 4 hours, there'll be homeless people sleeping probably a foot away from where I just parked. And so I know we have enough infrastructure in the city to put homeless people somewhere. About a year ago, We ran a homeless shelter at St. Peter's Church. People were there 24 hours a day. Funding got cut off, and that's typically how it goes. But some of these other entities, maybe in the grants department or something, could sway something another way. Tourism, 4%. And so I'm like you. So I think one thing that we're not doing, one thing that we're seeing through the protest is that Kojic is pulling out of the convention. They're not having a convention here because, no one wants to be in a city that's probably known as the most racist city, probably in the country, might be tipping the world right now. And so you might want to have some kind of reconciliation with, not having police beat up people. But also, other than just tourism, I think that our major key, right, and the sister said it, she lived in the 21st ward with me, we don't have economic dollars. And so if I had a plan or an amendment, I would like something north of Delmore to be built. And so if I'm envisioning something, I think Martin Luther King looks perfect to look just like Cherokee Street. I can't understand why not. Coming down Natural Bridge, since they're planning to bring the Metro Link, I would love to line Natural Bridge in between Natural Bridge and Kings Highway, all the way up to Natural Bridge and Grand with some businesses. It's a lot of deep space for a lot of businesses. Also, through the third floors, I think a lot of it is that we don't have the mom and pop stores anymore. So I see commercial buildings on LRA, but I don't see the funding. And so I think we should match economic development on West Florissant, Natural Bridge, Martin Luther King, Newstead, Taylor, Sarah, in the conventional ways that I know maybe people coming to somebody telling them as a deterrent to violence. I know people who own their own homes, own their own businesses, have an adequate school to go to with teachers and people that care, have a park and recreation center and something in a community that is clean and is maintained to a highest level, and they can go down the street and work, and they can go down the street and make money, and they can live in a community that invests in them to make their own money and bring it back into the community. I think that maybe, just maybe, if we invest, I don't know, 100 of that $500 million we gave to the police, take 100 billion, something like a ballpark village investment in North St. Louis. I don't know, put in Walnut Park. I'm for it. I'll put it right in Baton. It's a lot of space over there. I don't know, but something for black people north of Delmore, so we don't have to drive 20 and 30 minutes just to give our money to another tax bracket of the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. Phoebe Love.
Hello. Hi. I'm also here to speak in favor of Cure Violence. I go to the cab car meetings. I've seen the documentary. I was a criminal defense lawyer for 3 years. But what I want to speak about during my little time is my perspective as a victim of violent crime. Because that's when I knew that the arrest and incarcerate model, as they call it, was a joke. Just to be brief, I was attacked for my purse by two 15-year-old boys, I'm gonna say, and they smashed my face into the back of a parked car, and I ran away laughing with my purse. And I mean, the police were called, and they came and they took my information. Of course, they didn't catch the kids, but if they did, if they had put them in a cage for a while, and what would that have made me safer or anyone really safer? No. And that's if it's so-called working, and of course they didn't catch them. I mean, and so I mean, I came off light as a victim of, relatively easy as a victim of violent crime, but much worse has been done to more people since then, and all along. And what I want to do, as member of the unsafe public, what I would like to see is not to punish those kids, but to know what brought them to that point, to get to the cause of how did they get there. I mean, I've got 2 nephews. They would never do such a thing. Gee, why? I don't think they were born different. So cure violence goes right into what brought you to, what do you need? What brought you to this? What do you need? Fix that. It's more like prevent violence than cure violence, actually. And that's what we need. That's what I would like to see. Because I don't really care about arresting and incarcerating people. It doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Marion Whitfield.
Good afternoon, citizens. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having us here. I cannot go against the budget. That's way above my pay grade. But I would like to make some suggestions, and I concur with a lot of the instructions that a lot of these citizens of St. Louis have given. And the first thing I would like to say is that the city of St. Louis needs a mental health program, because a lot of them have some very serious psychological problems, and that goes from the top to the bottom. And then what it does is it incurs upon the rest of us to have to endure after the rest of them have been so mutilated and so discriminated and so treated like trash that they behave that way. And see, I remember, and I'm sure a lot of others remember, how St. Louis got to be where it is because it didn't get here by itself. Okay, someone brought you along. Somebody took care of you. Somebody took care of your children. Somebody cleaned your house. Somebody nursed your babies. And even somebody slept with your man when you didn't work it out. Okay, so when the news media talks about South St. Louis and Cherokee Street and how beautiful it is, and well, I think it's junky, but that's only my opinion. But, and I live right across the Delmar Divide. Okay, so I remember when it was a beautiful neighborhood. I remember when we had to go from neighborhood to neighborhood and sell parole in the little tin cans that they came in. I remember when we had an Annie Malone parade. My mother worked with Miss Annie Malone, so I know what that's about. I know when St. Louis had a desire to be great, but now it doesn't. Because what they're telling our children is that you don't matter anymore. We can see swimming pools, we can see playgrounds and soccer fields. Oh, congratulations, soccer moms. We do well to get a dirt playground with a basketball hoop. And then when it goes and gets broken, it stays broken. But that wouldn't happen in some other neighborhoods, and we know it. We know how you got your money, because we made it for you. And then you took it and made yourself better and then looked at us like we were something trash. We know how you got your money. We know how you got your country. We know, okay? And it's about time that you decided that we're going to do something about the way African Americans and people of color are treated in this town. Because if you don't, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You keep saying you don't have money to do this. You don't have money to do that. Oh, you have the money. It just means that you spend the money where you want it more likely than you are to spend it where it is needed. Public safety, we need, you may not be able to do anything about the St. Louis public schools, but you can do something about the playgrounds. We used to have monitors on playground. I mean, the boys did the woodwork. It's we don't do that sexual thing, girls' toys, boys' toys anymore. So, you know, there used to be Hadley Tech. There used to be a trade school. These young men and women could go to high school and come out and get a job and start a business. Now, what do? You got a ranking technical school, a college, a university, who has taken all the land and property over that they can, and I'm sure they're trying to look like St. Louis University, okay? But a lot of these children aren't going to make it to ranking, and if they do, they probably won't finish, because we know what the system is, and it's not going to always be fair, and it's not going to always give to the best and the brightest. It's going to give the one who has connections. And if you don't believe it, look at the millions that they gave to those universities to get their children in there. And you think they need to be in there? No, one is still putting on home makeup in front of the TV cameras. But I would like to also say that recreation, the playgrounds, or would love to see those children on the playground with making, pot holders, dollies, pillowcases, making lamps, and a lot of other things that they could show that they have it. We know that black people are brilliant, okay? That's no fantasy. We already know it. And you go back to your psychology books and you find out who's born and at what rate their mentality is when they're born. It's been written. It's been written. It's been studied. A lot of things have been studied, and a lot of you have been lying about it and trying to make it feel like it's something else it's not. Okay, Northside murders. South St. Louis, oh, the beautiful gardens that they have. And look at this street, and look at that street. Isn't that beautiful? And then when you go across the Delmore Divide and you get to North St. Louis, oh, well, we had 5 murders this morning, and we got 3 last night, and we'll probably have 4 more in the morning. You know what? You have created a monster, and we all have to deal with it. And I'm waiting for St. Louis to wake up. And I know how St. Louis works. And also, I would like to see the pensions in St. Louis increase too, because it stays the same. I know what you did when you had black people working for you. I know how you paid them. I know how you treated them. And I know how you got rid of them. And there's a lot of pain and suffering that you caused. And St. Louis live up to it. You can bleed blue, you can bleed red, you can bleed green too. And put the money where it's really needed, and stop lying to yourself and everybody else.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to need some help on this one. I think the last name is Johnson. I told you about your printing. Come on over here. I'm going to have a writing class with you. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
Please announce your name.
Yes, my name is Damian Johnson. First, I would like to ask, when are we going to start prioritizing fixing and paving finally the streets? Okay, could you hear me?
That's better.
Oh. When are you going to start prioritizing fixing and paving the streets? I know all the aldermen who are still here and or some of our left are continue to hear complaints about the streets. Some had to repair their tires 3 times. I know I have to ride my bike in S. And I would like to announce I am in one of the South City wards, 20th Ward, which is actually a poor ward on the South City, in the middle of the influential ward, the 6th, I know it's part of the 11th, 15th ward, and some of the 11th ward that needs improvement, and then part of the 6th ward need improvement in spite of seeing the big shameful, the big balls that they spent money on balls, but they did not spend money on paving the streets, and that's an issue that I'd like to see get corrected. I heard a previous conversation on public safety, and I would like to learn a lot about this. Programs, a lot of discussions is nice to hear in the Public Safety Committee. I'm one of the people who joined the majority last election, did voted for Proposition P. But I also would like to know what's going to be done and hold the money accountable, whether it be more policing as well as crime prevention programs. I know part of the 200th Ward is known for weed and seed programs. Part of the weed and seed program is supposed to have crime prevention program as well. I'm just learning about the cure programs. I heard about it a week ago, and I will like to get with some of the activists to learn about the meetings here. I'm just saying, whatever we do, whatever new programs we institute, review it, and don't be afraid to pull it back if we have to, or combining with other. And I also have finally a question for Paul Payne, if he's willing to come back up, explain what are the programs that's solely funded by the city and what programs that are also funded by the state, like is the Department of Health, that we guys getting like so low a percentage. What else is getting? Are they getting state and federal funding, like the police? I think that will probably help us to know what are the total revenue that's coming in for the police, and how much are we losing? Actually, my second question: how much are we losing with tax abatement? So.
Let me just give some clarification very quickly for Prop P. Prop P was approved by the voters, and when you voted on the ballot, it had the percentages of what the money would be spent on. So the decision was made by the public.
Right, yeah, I understand the decision. We can't legally go back and change it unless we put another ballot on the ballot. So I'm just, what was it? Yes, I understand that can't be changed. I know there's other stuff that you're flexible on when it comes to public safety and other future crime prevention programs. I'm just wondering, like, my question is how much are we losing on tax abatements, and how much money, what outside of the city budget, how much are we getting, whether from state or federal money? So that's my question.
I just wanted to give, I'll give the information to you. So we want to make sure that our clerk makes available to the public in our areas the annual report from the comptroller's office, because that can answer a lot of questions that people have. And there are also some recommendations from the comptroller for the future too. So we'd like to make, and it's also online. I'm sorry. I just said that I wanted to make sure that we had the annual report from the comptroller's office available to the public. It is also online, and in her annual report, some of the questions that you have are answered there in the annual report, and also some suggestions for the future on some items of interest for you are in, excuse me, are in the comptroller's annual report as well. Okay. Next we have Charlie Blake.
Good evening. Thank you for being here and for listening to our input. It's a really important part of this process, in my opinion. I'm Dr. Charlie Blake. I'm a scientist at a community college and resident of South City. I I'm here to talk about public safety and what that means to me and to advocate for the Cure Violence program. A few weeks ago, my friend, who's a pastor in our community, was at my house, and she was held up at gunpoint a few blocks away from my house and had her car stolen. And that was pretty scary. That did not make any of us feel safe. And what would make me feel safer is not more police. That's not what she wants. That's not what I want. I have also watched the police come very close to shooting my husband right in front of me. And I was the one that called them because my husband at the time was suicidal. The police did not make me safer that day. There are a lot of other things I could think of that would make me feel safer that we could have in our community that have to do with housing, education, parks and recreation, as people have mentioned, and also something like the Cure Violence Project, which takes a public health model and applies it to violence in a way that we know from previous research in other cities is effective. I mentioned I'm a scientist, so I like data and I like research. I like evidence-based methods, and we know that Cure Violence is all of those things. We should stop putting our money in places where it doesn't help us feel safer and start putting it in places that's going to improve the quality of life and the safety of St. Louis residents.
Thank you so much. Andrew DeSorales. Okay.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to point out, I'm speaking in favor of CAPCAR's Cure Violence initiative, that I wanted to point out that police over the past 40 years or so have become so heavily militarized that we may as well start thinking them more like soldiers rather than any kind of idealized image of an officer friendly. They're more like that guy right there. From what I've read, the city is considering adding 130 new soldiers into the police. And that's roughly 4 platoons that you're adding into this police force. And it just occurs to me that we need to stop treating public safety like it's warfare. That model has clearly failed. We need to start treating public safety scientifically as a matter of public health, and quite simply, that's what Cure Violence does. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Next, we have Andrew. Wait a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I got it.
Oh, yeah, you're on 2 lists. Okay, we're good. Let's do that. Donna Anderson.
Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
But I'm going to turn my back on you all because that's what you all have done to the children of my city. I'm speaking on behalf of those little people that live in this city. Not your children, the other children. So I'm going to turn my back this way and speak to the citizens. So, I'm in St. Louis. Haven't been here in 5 years. I left here. I ran from here and took my children to Arizona.
Okay.
Had
Put
no
that mic
money
down.
in my pocket to get away from this city. To get away from this city, to make sure that they had a better quality of life. See, I had a better quality of life growing up. I'm one of those Square Village Project kids from downtown. So I know what it feels like in the summer to go over there to that Loretta Hall Park and have arts and crafts and get food I know what that feels like. I know what St. Patrick's Center is, Tandy Park. I'm very familiar with my city. Ask me where my children are right now. Somebody, anybody. They're in Arizona. I'm never bringing my children to St. Louis. Never. Because my city has failed the children that are here. So why would I bring my children back here to see this toxic? It's called divide and conquer, and I'll tell you what happened. You guys might want to get your paper for the blueprint so we can clear this mess up and move on to helping the children of this city. This divide and conquer, it's not about a black and white. It's about that mighty green dollar. That's all it's about. That budget, trash it. You have a school up on Kings Highway at that freeway that's sitting up there. You guys need to take that school, the people who, the young lady with the talking about the tags, and you need to make an announcement. Community service hours, and in those community service hours, what you're giving the people, come on over here and paint. Let's get some trash. Let's put some windows up. And we're going to use that school for a rehab. So you guys got a lot of stuff going on in St. Louis. And so you take that school. Now you have a GED room. You have a food pantry. You have a laundry room. But you got to start with that mental health. It's toxic around here. It's a demonic spirit on this city. When you say that the city has the #1 crime rate, the #1 murder, the #1 high school dropout, #1 STD, #1 drug problem, #1 low income, #1 no jobs, that's bad. I don't know how they sleeping at night. I really don't. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. If we want to point the finger at somebody, we're going to take Mayor Francis Slay, who was in office for 25, 30 years. He's the problem because he built over on this side of town and he forgot about the babies on this side of town. That's not fair. It's not a black and white thing because some of those properties that's on the north side of town, they're owned by Caucasian people. That's that divide and conquer. Until the people come together and get some change, not the grown people. They're lost. We can't save them. We cannot save that mindset. But there's some little people. They would like to have a quality of life. These people had a quality of life. Their children had a quality of life. His grandchildren had a quality of life. I cannot come back here, but from long distance, I can help you all with this problem. It's sad. My good friend in Arizona, she's a doctor, a dean. She said, oh, we're going to take the Phi Beta, Phi Di Kappa to St. Louis. I said, no, you're not. I took money away from my city because that's my friend. So why would I have them come down here for a whole week, bring the children of ASU to go to that convention center downtown and risk little girls getting raped, cars getting stolen, laptops? Seriously, you all. When you know better, you do better. And these people behind me, they know better. Look at them. Until it hits your front door, then you'll cry out for help. So they're not crying yet, but you all are crying. You wouldn't be here if you wasn't concerned. Google, GoDaddy, Nike, State Farm, Blue Cross Blue Shield, companies in Arizona that provide work-from-home jobs. Let's get some work-from-home jobs. Since you can't get the police to do what they're supposed to do, make the people stay in the house and work. It's crazy. But I've been riding through my city since I've been here. I came back here to bury my godson. And I'm never coming back here again. I was on the corner last night at a candlelight vigil, little bitty people crying. Little bitty people releasing balloons, crying. Y'all know this don't make no damn sense. That if somebody tell me in Arizona I'm going to visit St. Louis for vacation, I say, no, you're not. I didn't attend St. Louis Public School. I got on a bus every morning at 4:30 in the morning with some Hubbards, some Allens, some Carters, some Joneses, some Perkinsons, and we went on out there to the county. I was the first African-American female to walk the halls of Lindbergh High School. And I'm working on my master's right now. But my city, you all need to get it. Not you all. We're hurting. We have the Band-Aid on us. They need to pull the Band-Aid off and start with therapy, mental illness. People walking around in this city, you speak to them and they have the clue, won't even say hi. It's companies that will come.
Ma'am, can you wrap up, please?
But before, I don't need the microphone, sister.
No, ma'am, I just said, could you please wrap up?
Wrap up?
Yes, please.
Why? Why do I have to wrap up?
Because we have a time limit.
What's the time
And
limit?
it was 3 minutes, but I let you go further.
Guys like for me to wrap it up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me just tell you all what to do. Divide and conquer. If you want to get your city back, you're going to have to start with mental illness. Then you're going to have to create some jobs. You're going to have to make them get up off their asses, release some of this property, and put some things in place for the children. Or St. Louis is going to be just like down there in Detroit. Picture that. It's time.
Thank you very much. Is it Brianni Holmes? Brianni Holmes? Brand, okay.
Spelling away.
All righty, thank you. Okay.
Oh, okay. I really don't need a mic, but I guess it's proper.
Well, we're recording so that the rest of
I
the
understand.
public
I'll follow.
can
I'll
also
follow.
hear your concerns.
I'll follow. But I mean, out there when I protest, I don't need a megaphone either. So basically, everybody that spoke before me, they are all saying the same thing, and I work closely with the alderman of the 4th Ward, which is where I reside, and the committee woman who is here, Gwendolyn Evans. And in the 4th Ward, we are trying to address the issues in our ward. The trash, the refuse, the parks, and you know, in that effort, you know, everybody is asking, like, why is it like this on the north side and like this on the south side and the Delaware Divide, and we talk about the Team 4 plan, and, you know, it goes on and on and on. And it just got me to thinking, I've never had a job where I was paid well and consistently for years, and I could not get my job done. Every job that I had, sometimes you get on a job, you may go to the temp service, they throw you at a spot, they say do A, B, C, figure the rest out. If you keep up, you can come back to work tomorrow. If you don't, they call somebody else. What really infuriates me about this city is that we pay people over and over and over and over again to do jobs that they don't perform well, and that's what everybody is saying. They're like, look, we putting all this money into this, all this money into that, and public safety is a big one because, I mean, Public Enemy, they made a song a long time ago that 911 was a joke, and in St. Louis it's still a joke on the north side. That's why Brandon Bosley was calling for the National Guard. I mean, I'm really not friendly, you know, with police. I associate with them. They're all good officers. However, I just feel that they should do their job. So when he called for the National Guard, I was like, yeah, call somebody. Shut it down. Do something. I don't want to live in a sundown town or anything like that, but it's just infuriating, again, for people not to do their jobs. So in working in the 4th Ward, we were looking at, the parks department and the streets, all the potholes. It was a little boy, it was a story on Facebook. He took some tar and he patched the pothole. And I've had dreams of doing that. And I didn't know that he was thinking the same thing in his city, wherever he was at. Like, how much do tar cost? How much will they fine me if they catch me if I'm out at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. patching potholes? That's the reason that Proposition D failed. For the Missouri bridges and roads, we're going to pay another gas tax. Look, no justice, no profits. Where is the money? And so financial transparency, I realize that you have hearings and it's a schedule, but I think that some of the money should be tied to financial transparency and the efforts to provide that to the public in a larger way. Social media, email lists, email people, let them know. Go to Facebook, say this meeting is going on here. And then tie funding, maybe a small portion, 5% or 10%, maybe it's legislative, to actual results. Where results, a lot of people talked about how the results are not justifying the amount of money that's being spent. And I think that, many of us in this room can agree with that. And so, like the other lady said, when it touches you, then you say, uh-oh, wait a minute, I better do something. So, like, if there's a way to improve financial transparency across the board with all of the city departments, that would be good. In the Fourth Ward, they came out and they were cutting grass. So, I start stalking the people. I'm like, okay, they over here, they over there. They left this grass in the street. I'm like, I bet they don't do that on the south side. So I'm running up on them. I'm calling people, hey, they over here. They over there. I'm chasing the people down. So, when I talked to several supervisors, the strategy that they're doing this year, they had 150. They say they had 150. I never counted 150, but they said that they was going from ward to ward. And, into like the second day, the third day, I talked to a couple of supervisors. I complimented them on the work that they were doing because they were doing a very good job. However, they have moved on from the Fourth Ward and they have not cut all of our ward. And they're coming back in 3 more months. And so every year, year after year, year after year, we have to live in a jungle. And so, like, we've resorted to, like, start buying equipment. Like, we gonna get some money together, try to pay our people. But then they said, well, you can't cut the city property because it's a liability issue. It's an insurance issue. So we are living with this day after day after day after day. And we know what has happened since the 1974 Team 4 plan. We know that the north side is affected differently from the south side. And so I wanted first financial transparency, but I think that more money, more funding should be given to wards that have been neglected for so long. And that is the Fourth Ward, that's the Third Ward, that's the 21st Ward, that's the First Ward, that's the Second Ward, that's the Fifth Ward. Giving us the same amount that you give Tower Grove or somewhere on the south side is not adequate because of the inequity. So I think that going forward, we need to really pay attention to the equity. I went, today I was on the south side, down there past Chippewa, and I was at Enterprise. It's a long story, I ain't gonna tell it. But I went driving around, and I just Googled addresses. And it was a house that was like 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. It was like $559,000 was the sales price. Now, I have an 8 bedroom, 3 bath. I think they said my house worth $15,000. And I have an additional lot as well. So I just feel that transparency is key. And then a lot of people have a problem with, and I'm wrapping up here, a lot of people have a problem with the amount of money that is going to public safety, and it's because we're not seeing the results. That money, some of the money from property, I know you can't change it, but some kind of money going to public safety should be tied to their racial bias training and their conflict resolution skills. And everybody talked about mental health because it is a big problem. Sick people and hurt people hurt other people. And drug testing, when they was playing Russian roulette, they was high as a kite. You know what I'm saying? So, like, how can they pull me over for drugs and they on drugs? And so I support Cure Violence because I've heard a lot of good things. I don't know what they do, but anything got to be doing better than what we're doing currently. And if Cure Violence can help with that, I think that it'll be twofold. It'll help us improve our city to make it more attractive to people outside, because people, even people that's from the south side of Fordham County, they be like, I'm not going to North St. Louis. So people in the country are like, nah, we'll pass on St. Louis. So we lose a lot of money just because of the stigma, and we've earned it. You know, we've earned that stigma, so we need to do something about it. And then the second way that Cure Violence can help is that will open the door for funding to more grassroots and nonprofit organizations to do more work. Because when, you know, when, I'll go ahead and say it, when Better Family Life, the Urban League, when they get these big $1 million grants, you know, I see them doing things in the community. I'm not going to say that I don't, but, you know, there's administrative costs, and then, you know, you have to have yes, ma'am, you have to have a meeting, so you have to eat, then they have to travel, and by the time the funds get to regular people, it's non-existent. And so I spent many years as a single mother. I can stretch $1. I live real good, even though I'm not clocking in nowhere, because I'm a protester and we don't have jobs. So basically, I think I support Cure Violence because I support us looking at best practices around the country and applying them to our daily lives and to the departments that we have. Thank you, respectfully.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So Gary Newcomer?
Hi, I will be fast, I promise. Thank you so much for staying this late. I really appreciate it. I was also one of the late people, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak, even though I missed that first opportunity. I was late because I work for the Community Builders Network. I was at work late. We're a coalition of community building nonprofits. I look around at the aldermen in the room. We represent nonprofits working in each of your wards. I'm also a member of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Coalition. So we're very excited to see that there's been an increase of funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It wasn't quite as much as what our coalition believed that it should be. They thought it should be at $10 million. But because of the slight increase last year, I did just want to say that that increase allowed for 10 new programs to take place. There were renovation of existing homes that were in pretty bad shape in North City. There were affordable housing resources made available in the Central Corridor in Joe Rohde's ward and in the Grove. And there were also tenant education efforts in Dutchtown as well, around all the speculation that's going on in the bad landlords. So it's a program that works really well. There's a lot of applicants that have tried to get funding from the program but haven't been able to because there's not enough funding in the program. And we're just very excited to see that next step, but we want it to kind of keep growing year after year. When I was little, I didn't have cable TV, so I watched a lot of PBS, and I remembered Reading Rainbow. And so one of the things that they say on Reading Rainbow is you don't have to take my word for it. So we went around and we collected postcards from residents all across the city. We had a graphic designer in North St. Louis design our postcards. They're really pretty. And on each postcard is a story about why affordable housing and the trust fund matters to them. So I have to be home cooking dinner by 9. So I will not be sticking around, but you can see the postcards right here. Here's one, here's 2, here's 3 and 4. So I'd be glad to bring them by City Hall some other time so you can read all the stories. They're written on beautiful postcards. Thank you. Keep supporting the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
We shall. Thank you. Next is Kenneth. That's it.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth McClam, and I run a nonprofit grassroots organization called the ARCA Safety Center. We do transitional housing and recovery support services. I really didn't know the gap was that big between the police and the human services funds, and it kind of answered a whole lot of questions, because I remember going to meetings one time, and I went into a meeting and a grant hearing, and St. Patrick's Center had about 6 grant writers, and the little bitty people like me, you know, we was in there trying to figure out how to write a grant. So the money that's going to, like, the homeless shelter networks, they continue to go to the big agencies, and the money is not being funded down to the grassroots agencies like us that are got feet on the ground 24/7. I live in an area where drug dealing is on both sides. I can walk out my door and whistle. I can get guns, sex, drugs, bombs, get whatever you want to in our neighborhood. I live in the 22nd Ward, and so many people have overdosed and everything, and right now, dealing with the people that's suffering from mental health problems and drug addiction, even though they got some of the things open, we don't have like rapid access. There's not enough funds in the community to deal with the people, and they say, well, I mean, I know they didn't mean that when they said let the older people die off and we're going to just deal with the young folks. But you can't do that, because they're going to eventually, although they may have come up nonviolent. I remember the guy that killed those 2 gas workers. He was a nonviolent guy, but just got so sick of living and looking at the conditions in the neighborhood. Our neighborhood looked like a war zone. And so when you ask for money just to repair the houses, then it's like, you know, none and void. However, it's a lot of those buildings that's been torn down didn't have to get torn down. A lot of those LRA buildings could have been like prehab, could have been fixed enough where they would have been attractable to people to come and buy and fix up if they had had, you know, the roof on there and gutters and things. But when they come and steal the gutters, the LRA people don't even pay enough attention, and the water come and just wash the mortar out, and they just crumble on down. So, you know, there's not enough attention paid to our neighborhood and things like that. We're not answering these questions. So we're not bringing solutions to the problems. That's what I mean. So I think that I haven't looked too far in this cure thing, cure the violence, but it sounds like a pretty good start. It do need tweaking. But what's going on, and people don't look at the big picture, this has already been predicted by the powers to be that, you know, they want to turn this into a police state. That's already going to happen. We can protest. We can do all we want to. And they're going to keep on hiring more police. They're going to scare the people into doing more to supporting the police. That's why, like I heard somebody say, they put their proposals out there and they give what they want. But the people that got the solutions to the problems, these folks are hurting. They don't have money for their kids. They don't have funds. So we just have to get the money to the people. And like I heard somebody say, these agencies are top heavy. A lot of them are top heavy. But, you know, the people up there, a lot of them, I think, doing a pretty good job. But it's just not enough funding, especially over here on the north side. I'm 70 years old, and I remember when Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill, I guess 64, 65, seemed like heroin just hit our neighborhood like a bombshell. And so they're talking about an opioid epidemic. That's been going on since the 60s. This ain't just started. I done been in penitentiary 4 times, shot twice by the police. So I know I done seen criminals. I done seen corruption in the police department, downtown, all over. And this is all by design. So, you know, this ain't just happenstance. But the people is going to have to step up to the plate and make the politicians more accountable, because they're only doing what their job description tell them to do. You can't do too much out of your job description if you want your job. But the people can push the folks and make the folks that's causing all these problems to back up off us. You can't do it with guns. You can't do it with violence. We're going to have to really get down and get out there and push and get a movement going, just like they said. Get these people off drugs, get them some mental health solutions, and get the other people with jobs. Then our neighborhoods will change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Just for a little bit of clarity, if you depend on politicians to solve the problems, they will never get solved. And it's your fault when you elect somebody over and over and over again, and you still see the same thing. Every politician has access to the exact same resources. The exact same resources. And even though I never really got along with Mayor Slay, we had many words, the one thing he did do was right. He gave North St. Louis aldermen extra money that we had control over. So you gotta know all of it, and you don't know all of it. But I said I wasn't going to debate. I said I wasn't going to say nothing. But at the end of the day, I depend on people on the ground to help solve problems. We got 2 more speakers, folks. We did good tonight. No, Sandra, I don't have you on here. Okay. We'll get to you, okay? So the next person is Sonia Gray. You still here? Sonia left. See if she's still out there. In the meantime, while we're trying to, I got to figure out this name. Is it Dawn Evans? Dwayne Evans. Dwayne, okay.
You want me to come up?
Why don't you please?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I'm glad that you're letting me take this time out to try to obtain a little bit of understanding. Can you hear me? Yes. I don't need a mic. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Remember re-recording.
Okay, baby, I got it for you. Okay. I'm an elected official, and I'm new at this, but I've been in the 4th Ward a mighty long time. I have always been an advocate for my neighborhood, even before I became the committee woman of the 4th Ward. And what I have seen taking place is the 4th Ward slowly being dismantled. And the resources that we receive, they're horrible. I have ridden around with the Commissioner of Forestry, Alan Jankowski, and we showed him the vacant buildings where the weeds were taller than me. Now I'm 5'3", if I lie, okay? But we've seen, he saw vacant lots, and it's a shame that we have to live like this. I was a carrier. I made deliveries out in Clayton, Ladue, Olivet, U-City, I said U-City, Overland, Richmond Heights, and I see how those individuals live. And I'm saying I shouldn't have to move out there in order to have a nice, safe, beautiful place to live. So I want to bring some of those ideas into the 4th Ward. Some of my ideas I have implemented in the 4th Ward. But, you know, it's disheartening when you're trying to move from here to here, and you've got the city fighting you. Now, even Alderman Moore, you talk about ways and means. We have found the way. We just need the means to do what we can do for ourselves. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for a hand up. We want to help ourselves. And what we suggested was just something simple as keeping our grass cut so that it looks nice. Even though there are vacant buildings and vacant lots, we want it to look like, well, somebody lives here. Instead of them coming to cut our grass twice a year. Now, they were in the 4th Ward, and I raised my hand to them because they did a good job. But my thing is, my grass don't grow twice a year. My grass grows every day. So, in between the time that they come back in the next 3 months, what do? We sit back and just watch the grass grow back up to where it was. We don't want to do that. We asked Alan Jankowski if we could just take over the 4th Ward, if we could cut the grass in the 4th Ward. We're not talking about the whole city, just the 4th Ward. We want to bring jobs to people who want to try and make our area look nice. Well, the contract has been given already, so whoever's cutting the grass, they're cutting it for the whole city. Well, I tell you what, if they were getting graded on the scale of A to F for the way our city looks, it would be failing. It would be an F. We want to do better than that. But the city says, well, we can only cut grass twice a year. I don't cut my grass twice a year. The city may come by and cut it, but I'm not even going to say they're going to do that. It just stays there. But we're tired of living in third world conditions. That's exactly what it looks like. The dumping, the tires being dumped in our alleys and streets. It makes you wonder, is that done by design when you're really out here trying to do something good? But I'm going to wrap this up because what I want to know, now, I was given this by a young lady over there because I didn't have the full stack when I got here. So I really couldn't follow along with what the young man was saying there. But I started looking at some stuff, and I see grants on here, grant funds. How can we get grant funds? How do you utilize that? Who has access to that? I don't know. But what we want to do is we can cut our grass when the city is in other parts of the ward. And if getting grants will help us do that, I just need to know. We have a way, we just need the means. Because we're tired of living in squalor. We get out and do our part, but it's only so much that we can do. But we have people that want to work, that can help beautify the city, if you guys will just give us a chance. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
I don't have a paid job, salary.
Thank you very much. Neither do we. So, and for those who don't know or understand what the charter says for an alderperson, we are identified as part-time volunteers. And they pay you as such, although you are working, if you're doing your job, you're working 50, 60, because I like my job, I'm average 65, 70 hours a week. But you don't get a pension. So I like to clarify things so that people don't have misunderstandings about who we are and what we get and what we do. And also to clarify, we have a city that had 900,000 people in it. The infrastructure is still here, which means there is not enough money when we barely got 300,000 people here to take care of the infrastructure that was created for 900,000 people. I'm currently fighting with some of my residents because they don't want their property values to increase. So they prefer you don't build anything new near them, don't improve their streets. They don't want their property values to increase because they don't want to pay any more taxes. We have not raised the taxes, and I know it's been a lot of years. Paul, you might know the answer. So I just want to give you some clarification for understanding, and we got to work with what we got. I believe that we could work better and smarter, and I believe that there's a way for us to cure, and I love that word when you say cure, that we can cure a lot of things, but it requires the connecting of dots, and it absolutely, positively requires you, the public, to be present and help take ownership to cure. So I thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm sorry, come on, baby. I'm sorry. I can only take one more speaker. I can only take one more. I'm losing my voice, okay?
Good evening. I'm Sandra Keeley, and I didn't sign the sheet because it said pro or con, and because I hadn't reviewed the budget, I couldn't really intelligently respond. So my first question, is the budget online where you can see line items by line item?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you know, what department is it? Where's the link for the budget? It's budget division, and it's the whole budget line item, okay. So I'll go home because I did go to the budget page and I downloaded something. But I'm just so full tonight, and they have spoken my feelings, but I am a person that believes in solutions.
That's the only thing
I believe in solutions, and I'm more and more telling this story about my 6-year-old who I sent her out to Parkway School District, and I'm a real estate professional, have been for a lot of years. I picked her up from the bus stop, and we were on our way home. We were going up the 5700 block of St. Louis Avenue, and my daughter started to cry. And I'm like, Bria, why are you crying? What's the problem? And she asked me the question in her 6-year-old way of speaking. She said, Mommy, why are the buildings so broken? So she leaves her neighborhood and goes out to Parkway, and she sees this veritable paradise. And the 6-year-old comes and realizes, what is wrong with this picture? And so there are all these movements. I'm so excited. There seems to be an awakening. I was at the Vacancy Collaborative Workshop. I'm so excited about all these minds coming together. I do see a shift coming. I do, because I've been here long enough to have my daughter, and she's 30 now, say that something is wrong. Why are these buildings so broken? And I said, well, I'm really going to do something about it to the best of my ability, even if it's putting one family in the neighborhood at a time. We have Alive and Well with STL, and how I work with the justice involved, and they talk about being trauma informed. When you encounter people, you never know if you may say the wrong thing to make them snap, or you may say the right thing to talk them off the ledge. So I have seen some effort here in healing, and I'm happy about that I've been here long enough to see a shift. So what I would like to have considered as a real estate professional, I understand that there was legislation passed in 1974 that created the ordinance whereby the LRA was created. And I've been used as an expert witness to help people that have lost their homes in the sales have some relief. And as I dug into the legislation, as you mentioned, at one time the population was 900,000. Well, this legislation was passed when the population was 600,000. I also found out in my research that it only applies to St. Louis City and Kansas City, and that's where we live. So this whole idea of the Team 4 plan was that a device put into place to help escalate the ultimate outcome of what we live and see every day. Well, my hope and desire is that at one point there was a time before LRA. How were they handling people that had problems with their taxes then? Also, in the St. Louis County, for their tax sales, you have almost 2 opportunities to redeem your property, and the state of Missouri gives you a year, whereas with the way that
the state law applies.
yes, exactly. So my hope, my dream and my hope is that the legislation that created the mayhem that's North St. Louis City will be reviewed judicially or repealed. So, because my personal experience was, my mother has lived in her house at 5746 St. Louis Avenue for 47 years now. She paid for it every month, 360 months, and got her deed in the mail. And 3 years after she paid the house off, someone called and said, your mother's house is in the paper for foreclosure, because she didn't realize that she was responsible for paying her taxes, because for 30 years it was in her mortgage. How many people are out here not having the understanding? And we're her kids, we're all college educated, but you know, my mom, she got blood out of a turnip. She raised 8 and my father, and I think he was making $80 a week when they raised us. So there is a story about the people that are losing their homes, and because of this legislation, this ordinance, they can't redeem unless the person that buys it has a heart and will try to sell it back to them. But we know that doesn't happen. So my dream and hope is, in my interaction with the Vacancy Collaborative, to see if we can put together a task force, because we're no longer 600,000. It almost seems like the legislation just should be voided out based on the fact that it was written on a population that no longer exists. But that's kind of what I wanted to say, and I appreciate this whole experience, because in these meetings you have people data-driven, and I said, let's do a busload and drive you folks through North St. Louis. Let's get on the ground, because they have no idea. You know, they have like the little charts and they do the charrettes, and they have all that stuff with the markers. But they can tell you where Sarah and Vandervanter is. They couldn't tell you that. So I'm just encouraged though, because I'm a solution-oriented person.
I want to thank you for sharing with us. I have something, I don't know what just came over me, but if you all bear with me for 2 more minutes. I have to recognize the 2 alderpersons that stayed to the end, and I have to give you 30 seconds or so to say something, because you stayed to the end. So go first, Pam Boyd.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Your input is very important to us. It's important to me because in my ward, I am community driven. So I make sure that my community has input and lets me know where they are and how they feel. Because as our vice chair said, the only way that we can rebuild the city is with a community. And so that's why I push my community and pick their brains and to come up with ideas. So thank you so much, and I humbly appreciate you all coming out and staying to this time of night to say how you feel and where your hearts are. So you need to give yourself a hand.
Absolutely. Thank you. Alderwoman, go right ahead.
Good evening. So I just agree with what my colleague said. I'm a freshman alderman. I've only been at the board a month. But speaking on behalf of what my sister said, when stuff is touching you, it's absolutely touching me. It's absolutely touched the generation before me and the generation before me in my family and around me in my community. So I feel the passion in the room. I would have never walked out on this room because this is what I ran on, being a voice for my community, listening and coming together and working collectively across the city to make it a better place. So I appreciate and thank you all for being here. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to say thank you to you all and get it recorded so that people can know that we're here, we're listening, we're here, it's touching us. We have children, sister, just like you said. We didn't have the means or the opportunity to move our children here, so a person like me has to raise my children here. So I'm not going to turn my back on not only my children, but any of your children. And I'm committed to that, and people around here know me and know that's what I ran on. So thank you again for being here. Everybody be safe getting home, and let's get to work.
All right. Alderwoman, only because you're a former alderwoman, I'm going to give you 20 seconds. Oh, I'll guarantee you that's not so. Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you because I cannot have that out there to the public. I will disagree with you because we just went through an exercise with them for some additional work they were doing on the plant there. And so everything was made available to us, and so I have to disagree with that. And I guarantee you that our comptroller would not let that happen either. No, Ms. Darlene Green would not let that happen. No, ma'am. So I thank you all and have a blessed day. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Bishop.